Put the headset on, otherwise you won't hear me. Hello, hello. Right. Good afternoon to all of those joining us in person here at COP27, and also a very warm welcome to those joining us online. This session is hosted by the Covenant of Mayors in Sub-Saharan Africa as part of the Urban Africa sessions here at COP27. My name is Megan Spires, and I wish you a warm welcome from the COMSA Secretariat team. As said, we are joined by both in-person attendees, but also an online audience, attracting many of our 320 plus cities that are COMSA signatory cities. We have live translation. So for those that are here with us in person, please use the headphones. 4 is for the floor, 5 is for English, and 6 is for French. And we must just take a moment today to thank the funders of this initiative, the European Union, BMZ and AECID, and acknowledge the dedicated work of long-term COMSA implementers, GIZ, AECID, AFD, and Expertise France. And in a moment, we will hear some opening remarks from 2 of the co-funders, the European Commission and AECID. Today's session will focus on climate-related trade-offs and how African cities navigate complex decision-making during the climate change emergency. I think it has been acknowledged very clearly over the last 2 weeks that in Africa, we are currently in a climate crisis. We are currently in a climate emergency, and we need to drastically scale up action and finance to implement those actions. The IPCC summary for urban policymakers was launched this week. And this report summarizes the recent IPCC reports for urban decision makers, many of whom are in the room, many of whom are listening online. And the report was very clear. It said that cities and urban areas are both sources of climate forces, but also important sites for innovation and implementation. And I, in particular, have been really inspired by the mayors that we've engaged with here, many of whom are COMSA signatories, in terms of the action that they're implementing on the ground. Just last night, I was in a session with the mayor of Lusaka and was just blown away by the amount of work that is being implemented in her city. And I can say that there are many other cities in the room and online that are doing exactly the same thing. The big stumbling block is finance. Cities need direct access to finance. And I'm proud to say that COMSA, with the long-term support of our donors, has been prioritizing ensuring that the cities receive finance to be able to implement their climate change plans. In terms of how the session will run, we'll begin with an opening statement from the Deputy Chair of the Regional Mayors Forum of COMSA. The Regional Mayors Forum represents the entire region of Sub-Saharan Africa, and each of these mayors were elected to represent their region, be it Central, West, East, or Southern Africa. And many of these Regional Mayors Forum leaders are here with us at COP27 and have been engaging over the last 2 weeks. This is a statement that we drew together in a RMF meeting during COP27, And it speaks to what is the call from our initiative, representing, as I say, over 320 cities and municipalities and towns across the continent, to the COP27 negotiators and beyond. And it captures where we are as an initiative in this current moment. So before we move on, I hand over to the Deputy Chair of the RMF. Mayor, over to you.
Good morning, everybody. Okay. Today is a special day for us, the mayors of the COMSA regions. So I'll read this statement on behalf of my other members. We, the Cabinet of Mayors in Sub-Saharan Africa, Regional Mayors Forum, representing the voices of over 320 cities in Sub-Saharan Africa, with a total population of exceeding 150 million people, and breaking off the Dakar Declaration, make the following statement here at COP27 in Egypt. Number one, cities in Sub-Saharan Africa are unique. Africa is projected to have the fastest urban growing rate in the world by 2050. Africa's cities will be home to an addition 150 million people by 2030. Young Africans are expected to constitute 42% of global youth. Cities and regions in Sub-Saharan Africa are some of the hardest hit by the impacts of climate change, but we have contributed the least to global greenhouse gas emissions. Number two, the climate and energy transition must leave no one behind. African cities, governments are tackling climate change as it overlays polycrisis while our cities grow rapidly, with the accompanying development needs. In this context, we need climate and energy resolutions that make an integrated approach, adjust that, and inclusive of youth, women, and vulnerable communities. They must create jobs, bring social development, and break down inequalities. In Sub-Saharan Africa, our residents face the greatest impact of climate change, despite contributing very, very minimal to the problem. We as city leaders are prioritizing adaptation to the climate impacts in Africa. It is estimated that Africa gets only 12% of financing. It needs to be adapted to adapt to the changing climate. We call for an allocation of climate finance between climate change adaptation and mitigation. In increased access to sustainable energy and clean cooking offers an opportunity for Sub-Saharan African cities to develop based on low carbon technologies. This will only be possible if, as sub-national governments, we receive direct access to finance at local level, while solutions are best implemented. Number four, water is life. Our Sub-Saharan African cities and regions are dealing with climate change influenced floods and droughts, and require urgent support in assisting our residents in adapting to water-related climate change impacts. Number five, COMSA signatories have developed plans and priority actions. These plans need to be implemented. We call upon the international communities to support significantly increasing finance for adaptation, loss and damage, and access to sustainable energy and clean cooking. Adaptation actions are underway, but need to be revamped up. We also know that there will be residue loss and damage. Therefore, loss and damage finance is essential to protect us from inevitable impacts of climate change. It must be new and additional to meet the needs that cities and regions are facing, and must not be reallocated from other climate and developmental priorities. Climate finance must not be exacerbated the burden on cities by increasing their debts, and should be specifically allocated to sub-national government, as climate change impacts are felt right at local level. I read this message jointly crafted by Regional Mayors Forum of the Covenant of Mayors in Sub-Saharan Africa Initiative. This I read on behalf of my chairperson and the members of the COMSA Region of Mayors. The COMSA Region of Mayors is supported by ICLE Africa, Local Government Sustainability, United Cities and Local Governments Africa, GIZ, Expertise France, AFD, and AECID. The time for talk is over. I'll repeat this. The time for talk is over. We are ready to revamp up our actions, and we need the means to build climate resilience now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Chitangala, Mayor of Lusaka. Thank you so much. Okay, we're now going to hear from two of our co-funders in some opening remarks. So we're first going to be joined virtually by Ms. Vera Kellen, who's the Program Manager for Climate Change at the European Commission, as said on behalf of one of the co-funders, the European Union. So over to Vera. Vera, we can see you. You're welcome.
Yes, apologies, it is working now. Can you hear me?
Indeed.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi. Thank you to you all. Thank you very much to the Covenant of Mayors for having convened this meeting. Thank you to the Mayor for having read the statement just now. Thank you to all the mayors in the room, to the youth representatives, to anyone who has come to this event today, and particularly welcome to the Friends of Climate. It is my honor to welcome you here today in the room and online on behalf of the European Commission. Thank you for allowing me to do this online, which is my small contribution to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. I would like to repeat a few words on what Megan already introduced for the Covenant of Mayors. The Global Covenant is a flagship initiative for the Commission, and the regional chapter to Sub-Saharan Africa has been vital in our EU-Africa partnership. We are grateful that this is not an EU alone initiative, but that it is co-funded by the German Ministry of Economic Development and Cooperation and the Spanish Agency for International Development Cooperation. Under the COMSA, over 320 cities have made political commitments, and more than 40 have adaptation plans that are ready to be implemented. This vision of cities taking action is supported by the EU because it is a lesson learned from home. In the European Union, some 2/3 of all laws are implemented in municipalities. European cities by law have a say in climate and energy plans of their national governments. These plans put together tell how the EU delivers on its climate neutrality commitments under the Paris Agreement. Consequently, lawmakers must involve and listen to the cities and their citizens, because after all, even a strong law becomes weak when it is not put into practice. Our support to the Global Covenant and to the regional chapter of Sub-Saharan Africa consequently aims at bringing concrete benefits to the citizens, improving air and water quality, and making the city a better place to live for the respective citizens. The statement that was just read by Madam Chair of the COMSA Regional Mayors Forum is powerful, and it captures the urgency that African cities are facing on a daily basis. Mayors are on the front line of the impacts of climate change, and these impacts are going to increase both in frequency and intensity in the coming years. That is why the Covenant of Mayor initiative is so critical to anything and everything done and decided on climate change. I would like to highlight 2 points made by the mayor in the statement. Madam Mayor mentioned that the cities and regions in Sub-Saharan Africa are the hardest hit, but the least contributor to global greenhouse gas emissions. She further mentioned that by 2030, young Africans are expected to constitute 42% of global youth. So these 2 points are really what should guide our conversation today. You came here today to discuss how African cities navigate complex decision-making during the climate change emergency. And really what that question is how do you prioritize when your house is on fire? Many of you in the room and online have been in exactly this situation. And what is it exactly that you took out of your house? Very often, what we take with us is not helping the neighbor's house not catch fire. Very often, what we take with us is not helping us necessarily recover faster afterwards. These are some of the lessons learned of the past years. And the European Commission has therefore increased its support to the Global Covenant to more than 50 million euros and another 40 million to the regional chapter to Sub-Saharan Africa, and we intend to continue this support. We have further put the green transition as a priority in the heart of our EU Green Deal, and particularly the external dimensions of it. And Africa will be our partner, priority partner for this green and just energy transition, as our president has so often referred to in other occasions. This green transition entails that a continued support from the EU to Africa to increase the share of renewable energy generation, but also to increase the number of African people that have access to affordable, reliable, and sustainable energy services. All priorities of the Covenant of Mayors and priorities mentioned by the mayors today. In order to recover faster, the EU cooperation has massively upscaled investments in disaster risk reduction. In 2014, the amount we contributed to this was a mere 10 million, which today is 845 million. And this is notwithstanding the Team Europe initiative that was presented yesterday at the EU Pavilion, which contributes in a large extent to disaster risk reduction and quicker recovery after disasters hit. Our work for recovery covers all the strands from early warning systems to community resilience programs and to climate risk insurance. And these are elements that are crucial also to the Covenant of Mayors. Further, we have a whole new volley of work on the adaptation with a 100 million euro contribution to the adaptation fund following the pledge at the COP26 last year, making the EU and its member states the biggest contributors with more than 350 million euros. These targets and pledges confirm the EU's engagement to continue delivering on the Glasgow Climate Pact, especially as regards the urgency of scaling up action to strengthen resilience and reduce vulnerability. But we are aware that these amounts of money are still not enough. They are not enough to finance the needs of the population. They are not enough to finance the action plans of 320 signatory cities and 15 adaptation plans that are ready to go. Yet we will continue to focus on this. And with that focus, we focus on the connection and cooperation between mayors and the young people of the African cities, so that they can be more resilient and live in a more sustainable city. The youth empowerment is a top priority for our Commissioner Jutta Urpilainen and for the whole Commission. Making sure that youth has a voice at all levels is central to the EU's partnership with Africa. In fact, in 2022, the European Union has declared it the Year of Youth and youth participation as a central to our values. considering that by 2030, 42% of youth will be living in African countries. The African youth is at the heart of our actions. The past 4 COPs have brought the element of youth more into the center. And while science is working to allow us to live long, healthy lives, we, as inhabitants of this planet, also need to make sure that there is a place for those, for us and for those that come after us, to spend those lives. So the direction is clear. We need and we want to actively engage with youth, with mayors, with local governments and with national governments to engage youth as the actors of change and to build a better future. As the work that the European Union and all other development partners is doing is not enough, we strongly count on the private sector and on all people, individuals and companies to engage in making the 1.5% decrease a reality. I want to use this opportunity of the opening remarks to challenge you today. All of you present here online, but mostly those present in the conference halls where you are able to walk around. You were able for the last few days and weeks to walk around, to talk to people, to get information and to see the full picture of possibilities, but also of limitations. And I challenge you to ask yourself for the question that we are dealing with in today's panels. What are you doing every day to keep your home safe of the metaphorical fire? And what can you do to stop the fire from catching your neighbor's house too? What are the steps you have taken to make sure that if the fire comes your way, you can recover faster? I'm looking forward to listening to conversation, and a big thank you for all of you for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vera. Very inspiring input. In particular, the quote that stands out for me is, how do you prioritize when your house is on fire? And that's exactly what we're tackling today in the session, is the trade-offs when decisions are made at the city level when we're dealing with a crisis. So thank you so much for joining us virtually today. We do appreciate it. The second short remark is going to come from Gonzalo Vega Molina, who's head of the Department of Cooperation Sub-Saharan Africa at AECID. AECID is also a co-funder of the Covenant of Mayors Sub-Saharan Africa. Gonzalo, we can see you. You're welcome to proceed.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Thank you for inviting the Spanish Agency for International Development Cooperation, AECID, to this important event. Our director regrets not to be able to join you today. My name is Gonzalo Vega. I'm responsible for cooperation with Sub-Saharan Africa, and I would like to especially thank the organizers and those present in the room for creating this space to emphasize the role of cities in the fight against climate change. I myself, I am sorry not to be there with you. Spain is a very decentralized state. In Spain, regional and local authorities not only play a fundamental role in the provision of services to citizens, but also contribute to ODA efforts and forging partnerships. As you said before, Africa's future lies in the cities in a context of overlapping crises as countries strive to recover from COVID-19 and are confronted with new challenges related to food insecurity, energy access, or economic instability. African cities face complex decision-making processes every day. And the most systemic of all crises, climate change, cannot be left aside. There are clear synergies between different priorities, such as promotion of resilient and sustainable food system, protection of human rights, better access to water and sanitation, and climate adaptation and mitigation efforts. Extreme events as cyclones and floods produce loss and damages that require immediate action and resources. Specific finance is needed quickly and must not be reallocated from other climate priorities. At the same time, emergencies are exacerbated by climate change. The Spanish cooperation targets both short and long-term needs. Our humanitarian action is oriented to emergency response, disaster risk reduction, and prevention. The Spanish cooperation system is currently undergoing several processes to better adapt to the current challenges. First, the Parliament is working to pass the new law on sustainable development cooperation and global solidarity. Second, Spain will also approve a new master plan for development cooperation for the coming years. Of course, the fight against climate change and the promotion of renewable energies will feature prominently. Let me take this opportunity to mention some of our climate actions in Africa. First, the Spanish cooperation, together with the EU and Germany and other European partners, contributes and implements the third phase of the Covenant of Majors in Sub-Saharan Africa initiative in Senegal, Mozambique, Cape Verde, and Mauritania. Indeed, we value very much this partnership between networks of cities, development agencies, and finance institutions, which support cities to face the double challenge of climate change and access to sustainable energy to achieve a sustainable, climate resilient, and low emission energy future. Moreover, in Cape Verde, for instance, we prioritize blue economy through budget support, and in Ethiopia, we work with the National Disaster Risk Management Commission. AECID has established a new fund for green transition with authorities and civil society focused on nature-based solutions and circular economy. Through our finance cooperation, in collaboration with the World Bank, we address the treatment of solid urban waste in Senegal, the project called Promoged, and the regional project to support the irrigation initiative in the Sahel, Paris, in Niger, Mali, and Senegal. The Spanish finance cooperation is expected to increase in the coming years in order to contribute to reduce the gap in climate financing. Also, I would like to mention that more than 7 million euros have been provided since 2009 to the ECOWAS Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, ECRE. With ECRE, we will increase, for instance, our work on clean cooking. These actions are also complemented with the support of multilateral organizations. AECID supports the global program to support nationally determined contributions. I would like to underline that Sahel countries are among the most vulnerable countries in the world to risk of climate change. Climate change is seen as a major aggravating factor for existing vulnerabilities in the Sahel. Spain currently presides over the General Assembly of the Sahel Alliance, the main donor and partners coordination platform in the region. There are real opportunities specific to the region to develop as a resilient Sahel. In conclusion, I would like to reiterate the commitment of the Spanish cooperation to green transition and the fight against climate change, also to human and social development, and in collaboration with regional and local authorities in partner countries. Thank you for the statement by the Regional Majors Forum Vice President and all the majors participating today. We listen to you very carefully. Your point of view and concerns will help us to better understand current challenges and how to better work together, both bilaterally and through the Team Europe spirit. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Gonzalo. Very inspirational words. So we're going to move to a more interactive part of the session now. And so I'd like to just introduce our panelists, and then if they don't mind coming forward, we have Dr. Maïkanti, who's the Honorable Mayor of Garoua 3, Cameroon, and one of our Regional Mayors Forum COMSA mayors. We have the Deputy Lord Mayor in Nyanjura of Kampala Capital City Authority, Uganda. David Howlett has just made it in the nick of time. He's a senior advisor and loss and damage lead for the high-level climate champions. And Dr. Sarah Collenbrander, who is director of the Climate and Sustainability Program at the Overseas Development Institute. And last but certainly not least, we also have Marcus Meyer. Marcus Meyer is from the African Development Bank, and he's the Principal Urban Development Officer there. Welcome to the stage. Come this way. Great. So we've got a series of questions, and I'm going to start with the Mayor, Mayor Maïkanti, who we know earlier this year developed what we call in COMSA, a very long name for a climate plan, but a Sustainable Energy Access and Climate Action Plan, which is a first in Cameroon for being an intercommunal COP, as we call it. And Mayor, we'd be really interested to hear from you in how your municipality navigated the trade-offs and the decisions that must have come to the fore as you were developing your climate plan, and how you're planning to take it forward and implement it on the ground. Over to you.
Okay, hello everybody. So I'm Dr. Abdourrahmane Maïkanti, the mayor of Garoua City Council. So let me continue in French, so it's really easy for me. So le processus d'élaboration du plan climat de Garoua a duré 2 ans et a été extrêmement collaboratif à plusieurs niveaux. Entre les municipalités d'abord voisines, le maire de la communauté urbaine de Garoua et les maires des communes d'arrondissement de Garoua 1, de Garoua 2 et de Garoua 3 se sont engagés ensemble tout au long du processus pour élaborer le plan climat. Il y a eu collaboration entre les secteurs, une démarche collaborative, entre les secteurs avec les différents départements municipaux affectés ou contribuant au changement climatique. Il y a également eu une démarche collaborative entre les acteurs du changement, les élus, le personnel technique, les ONG, les ménages et les partenaires internationaux. L'élaboration du plan d'action d'accès à l'énergie durable et le climat résulte de cette adhésion. Ce plan témoigne de notre engagement volontariste à consolider au plan national notre posture de ville modèle en matière de gouvernance environnementale, climatique, énergétique et de ressources et sources d'inspiration pour d'autres collectivités. La ville de Garoua est signataire de la Convention des maires d'Afrique au sud du Sahara depuis le 27 novembre 2019. Donc, plusieurs phases ont été depuis lors obtenues. Nous pensons donc planifier de manière collaborative et inclusive prend plus de temps, mais cela nous a permis de développer un plan climat pour l'ensemble de la ville de Garoua qui est basé sur des données scientifiques et sur les expériences vécues de nos citoyens. Avec une enquête de terrain qui a porté sur plus de 1000 ménages, 9 ateliers participatifs, des recherches documentaires et une dizaine d'interviews ont été réalisés. Nous avons tous pu nous former sur le changement climatique et planifier pour une échelle de temps et d'espace qui va au-delà de nos mandats habituels. La manière dont les compromis ont été traités, certes, une telle action nécessite beaucoup de compromis. Parfois, les intérêts divergent, mais il va falloir, n'est-ce pas, les réunir pour trouver un chemin convenable. Donc, le premier compromis est le temps qu'il faut pour réellement collaborer. Le temps et le processus que nous avons mis dans l'élaboration de notre plan climat ne nous donnent pas de résultats tangibles immédiats. Mais c'est avec ce processus que nous nous sommes formés et c'est avec ce plan que nous pouvons maintenant approcher différents partenaires comme le FECOM, qui est le Fonds national d'infrastructure, qui finance certaines activités au Cameroun. Un autre compromis également a été sur le type d'action à prioriser. Comme toutes les communes ne sont pas au même pied d'égalité, toutes les communes n'ont pas ne sont pas placées dans le même contexte. Donc, il a fallu trouver, n'est-ce pas, un compromis entre les 3 communes d'arrondissement de Garoua 1, 2 et 3, de même que la communauté urbaine. Les besoins en adaptation et en atténuation sont différents, effectivement. Et nous avons dû trouver des compromis pour prioriser des actions qui bénéficient aux groupes de la population les plus vulnérables. Par contre, nous étions tous d'accord sur l'importance des co-bénéfices pour les actions d'atténuation des changements climatiques. Atténuer nos émissions n'est possible que si cela améliore la vie de nos concitoyens. Sinon, personne ne serait partant ou adhérera à cette démarche. Par exemple, le principal moyen de transport à Garoua est le mototaxi. Nous voulons entamer une transition vers les moteurs électriques en nous inspirant d'exemples d'autres pays en Afrique comme Kigali et autres villes signataires de la COP27. Cela permettra à terme de réduire de manière significative la pollution, le coût du transport, les émissions de gaz à effet de serre. Sans ces co-bénéfices, les actions d'atténuation ne seraient pas priorisées. Sachant que la ville de Garoua contribue peu aux émissions de gaz à effet de serre et que l'adaptation est plus urgente. C'est ainsi que dans le domaine de transport, les co-bénéfices attendus sont l'augmentation de la circulation des personnes, amélioration de la sécurité grâce à l'introduction des traversées de route et le co-bénéfice sur le plan économique et l'augmentation des revenus des ménages. Maintenant, sur l'affectation des espaces, sur le plan environnemental, ce qui est attendu comme co-bénéfice, c'est l'amélioration de la biodiversité et des qualités des sols et la réduction des émissions. Sur le plan social, il est attendu donc l'amélioration de la sécurité alimentaire et la santé des communautés agricoles. Sur le plan économique, c'est l'augmentation de la production agricole et sur le plan sécuritaire, la baisse des conflits. Comme j'aime souvent le dire, si l'adaptation est une nécessité, l'atténuation est une opportunité. Merci, je vous remercie. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor. I'm now going to head to our Deputy Lord Mayor in Nyanjura of Kampala and ask you about the work that's been happening in Kampala. And I want to build off something that the Mayor said around one of the first trade-offs being between the time and process to collaborate and the urgency and speed with which we need to implement climate action. And we know that in Kampala, you've got pretty much a world-class climate action plan, right? It's now including greenhouse gas monitoring and air quality within it. But there's also potentially a trade-off around planning with real evidence and hardcore science and data, which is needed so that there's not maladaptation, but also the need to urgently implement action on the ground. So, Lord Deputy Mayor, if you don't mind reflecting a little bit on Kampala's climate change action planning and what you see are the most important next steps.
Thank you so much, Megan. It's a pleasure being here, especially with this wonderful panel. Ladies and gentlemen, in 8 years, it will be 2030, a make-off or break date for global sustainable development ambitions. And this is where our target to have the greenhouse gas emissions is. And by achieving this target, it's only when we can look at the 2050, where we are expected to be at net zero. To achieve that huge ambition, cities must be at the center because cities consume up to 80% of the global energy input, generate 70% of all waste, and contribute 75% of the greenhouse gas emissions coming from the building sector, transport, industry, and that is according to the UN report of 2020. Now, the most affected people by climate change are the downtrodden, and these are people that I'm so passionate about, mostly those in slums and markets whose merchandise and houses are washed away by even the slightest of rains, and I'm talking about Kampala here. Therefore, this means that cities are an essential piece in the global climate puzzle, and that we are at the front line of the responsibility of both reducing emissions and decreasing the climate vulnerability of especially the urban poor. Cities are growing at a rate of 65%, as already has been said, and air pollution. Please listen to this. Air pollution will in the near future kill more of our population than HIV. Now in Kampala, in Uganda, about 28,000 people die each year in our country as a result of air pollution, as compared to 34 people who died in 2020 due to HIV. So this is a threat, and a very big threat to future generations. Now, whereas Kampala is a green city, it is absurd that we are losing most of our urban population to infrastructure development. Cities' wetlands have severely reduced in size, and this is because of encroachment. Sadly for us, our national government has converted many leisure parks and recreation facilities into business facilities, and others have been alienated for private use. Now, as Megan has said, as Kampala leaders, we have worked on what we call the Climate Change Action Plan. And this we are working with every stakeholder in making sure that no one is left behind. Let it be the business sector, service providers, associations, name it. Of course, we have not been doing this alone. We've been doing it with COMSA, UNDP, Expertise France, and the European Union. Now, Kampala Capital City is committed to promoting the restoration and conservation of our unique biodiversity and environment for current and future generations. In order for the city to achieve the reduction in emissions by 22% as set out in the SDG 13 Paris Agreement, there is need for a perfect shift in how the city manages its transport, energy waste, and green infrastructure. Now, we have, of course, been doing some work, and under our air quality monitoring and control, an average of 2.5 levels was recorded in the quarter, were higher than what is recommended by the World Health Organizations. Now, the above observations emphasize the need for improved control measures. For example, we undertook an energy audit in the city, and the following were established under the guidance of our Climate Change Action Plan. Electricity only contributes to 80% of the total energy demand for the city. And what we mainly use that is of course mainly used for industry and household lighting. Petroleum products contribute 42% of the energy demand, mainly for transportation. 50% of the energy requirement is supplied by charcoal and firewood, and this is mainly for household cooking. About 84% of the households in the city use electricity for lighting. Less than 5% of the households in the city use electricity for cooking. Over 80% of households use wood fuel, and that is charcoal for cooking. And you can see that is really absurd. And recently there's a very big article that ran in one of our local dailies, and they said Kampala can no longer breathe. Because if you look at the statistics, Kampala is one of the cities that has been highly hit by emissions and air pollution. So the situation is really bad. And as city leaders, definitely we are not seated. We have tried to come up with measures at a local level, measures that we can manage. Now, much as Kampala is the center of everything, we have said, yes, we understand that people have to come to Kampala and work, but we have created what we call non-motorized transport. So within the city, we have told people, please keep away, because we know what it means when we reduce on the cars, when we reduce on the motorcycles that come in the city. And of course, we have also tried to reduce on the congestion in the city. And this we have done painfully by increasing on the parking fees within the city. So if you're coming to the city, you should know that you're going to pay some amount of money, and therefore that in a way has reduced on the numbers that come to the city on a daily basis. And of course, we are moving technology. Gone are the days when everybody was required to come to the streets. You know how it's done in our African countries, and then you stop a car, and then you stop a motorcycle to carry you to work. Now we have embraced technology at the comfort of your home, in the comfort of your bed. You can, all you need is a smartphone. You can tap and order for a self-border. You can tap and order for an Uber to take you to work. Of course, that saves the lives, because when you're on the streets, you're definitely taking in the emissions, and therefore we are also taking that. And we have also started on the green campaign, where we have secured 5 acres of land to plant what we call the Lord Mayor's forest. So I can say for now, we are working in progress, but we are doing our level best to make sure that the lives of our people are not put in danger. I'll stop it at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deputy Lord Mayor. So, David, I'm going to ask you about loss and damage, and your title allows me to. What the Lord Deputy Mayor and the Mayor are speaking about inadvertently is that we are in an era of loss and damage, that African cities are already experiencing climate change impacts and loss and damage. We know that you've done work on this as part of the Race to Resilience campaign, as part of the High-Level Climate Action Champions team. What are your thoughts about how our cities, how our COMSA cities engage with this topic of loss and damage, and what would be your recommendation to them?
Thanks, Megan. Really big question. Really pleased to be here on this panel, and also, yeah. So I work with the high-level champions. That's Dr. Mahmoud Mahidin and Nigel Topping. Although Nigel will cease being champion tomorrow, and then there'll be a new champion from UAE. This year, the champions have been really looking how do we increase action, and asked us to look at the issue of loss and damage. And been really listening to the two deputy mayor and the mayor. What strikes me immediately is the question: why do there have to be trade-offs? But let me come to what about loss and damage. And we've been talking to cities, we've been talking to businesses, well, regional governments like Scotland, but also regional governments in the global south. Climate loss and damage is happening now. Just have to look what's happening in Nigeria. You know, millions of people being affected. Just close to Uganda and Somalia, maybe 1.5 million children are going to be malnourished by the end of the year. So loss and damage is happening now. It's happening to cities. And so what do we need to do about it? You know, and the key thing is to see this holistically. We can't just do mitigation, adaptation, and loss and damage. Deputy Mayor, if you'll be seeing floods and impacts in Kampala, you've been talking very eloquently about how to reduce your emissions, tackle issues of informal settlements and slums. So the key thing is to look this across the piece is the first message. And also it's about, if you look at another really good example in Africa, is the floods in KwaZulu-Natal and what happened to Durban. The Toyota plant, 20,000 people were laid off, 30,000 people in the manufacturing sector. The port was smashed up. So the city of Durban is not just going to say, well, we'll do loss and damage, we'll do mitigation. It's about getting investment into that city to make it resilient, be able to stand loss and damage. The key thing, obviously parties here are discussing about how to finance loss and damage. We're all looking to see progress there. But I think the one message I might finish with is that the financing needs to flow now, not in 5 years' time, not in 10 years' time. So how do we support city governments and region and sub-regional governments, whether it's counties or provinces? So how do we mobilize finance from the private sector as well as from the public purse? And I'll just conclude that the champions launched it was a discussion paper on this and how to finance it from taxation, from grants, from insurance. So really looking forward to seeing how we work with cities, and we're pleased to work with the Compton mayors, ICLEI, and C40 on how to mobilize finance at scale. But I don't think there should be trade-offs. Why should a city, whether in any African country, having to trade off between looking after its citizens and suffering loss and damage, which largely they have not caused? Anyway, thanks, Megan.
Thank you so much, David. Sarah, I'm going to ask you about finance, but I'm also going to say to you, take us where you want to. You've obviously been listening to all the inputs. The question that was prepared is that you obviously know about the frustration that our cities are feeling around, we're dealing with the impacts, we need finance, we're already moving, why can't this flow faster? But speak to that and or anything else you feel would be good for the audience to hear.
Thank you for that very open invitation, Megan. Stop me at any point, guys. I have a whole TED talk on this. So I want to bring this conversation back to the conversations that are happening just a few rooms over in the plenary about climate finance at the moment, and how I hope that will play out for cities across Africa and elsewhere. I think by now all of you will know that horrendous figure, the $100 billion goal, and the even more horrendous figure, the fact that even though the 100 billion goal was agreed in 2009 to be reached by 2020, we're 3 years after that milestone, and developed countries have still only mobilized 80 billion a year. Even using their own accounting mechanisms to be as generous as possible, they have only got to 80 billion. So the starting point to say is that there is just not enough concessional finance in the system for climate change. Even if they hit 100 billion, that wouldn't be enough. And full recognition of that failure and that status quo. But the piece that I want to link back to is the conversation going on at the moment, which is negotiations about what will follow the 100 billion goal. The 100 billion goal wraps up in 2025. Developed countries are meant to mobilize 100 billion every year in that period, 2020 to 2025. Given the shortfall so far, there's lots of conversations about whether they should mobilize 600 billion over 6 years so that in the future they catch up. But I don't think any of us have high hopes for the credibility of those donors, particularly a few like the US, Australia, and Canada, which have continued to fall short on their fair share. So this new goal that's kicking into place, hopefully, has two distinctive characteristics which are being negotiated at the moment. The first one is about the quantity of the goal. What is your number going to be that we're all working towards? Is it just going to be 100 billion again? Or is it going to be much bigger? And a number of parties are kind of floating out the figure of 1 trillion at the moment, but that is not in negotiations. It's just being submitted and raised and planted in the media. But the bigger and more interesting piece is, for the first time, we're hoping to see in the climate accords a negotiation very explicitly about the quality of climate finance. And I think that's the question that actually African cities really need to hear about. And some of those topics are getting lots of attention. So, for example, there is now a growing consensus that there should be a balance of funding for mitigation and for adaptation, and that anything for loss and damage should be additional to that. There is a growing consensus that a large share of finance for adaptation should be grants. Although there's talk about other mechanisms as well, like insurance, though that I think will be a small subset. But I think one of the conversations that will be really important, not just for African cities, but for African countries at this point in time, is the story about mitigation finance as well. And that's because low carbon development tackles many of the other issues that are really important to African cities. And I think we heard very powerfully from Kampala the story of air pollution and what everyday human tragedy that already is and how it interfaces with climate goals in that particular city. And with mitigation, there's currently a very complicated conversation going on around whether that should also be grants, particularly if you're working in low-income countries, or whether we should be using loans in those contexts. Because a lot of the investments you make in mitigation are things that actually boost your economy. You have healthier workers, you have more energy supply, you have more efficient industries. And so you're growing the economy and you're better able to repay debt. And the reason that matters is that if you have a bunch of countries borrowing for mitigation and putting it back into something like the Adaptation Fund, the Green Climate Fund, the World Bank, the African Development Bank, that keeps a pool of climate finance going that can then be reinvested again and again. And actually, the best possible example of this, I think, comes from a number of African countries: Kenya, Senegal, Mali. Sorry to not have examples from the floor here today, but I'm sure you're doing excellent things. Oh, we've got examples from here. So the three countries that I just named are piloting something called a decentralized climate fund, which works very much along these lines. What happens is that at the county level or at the city level, these countries have set up a revolving fund, partially capitalized by the national government, partially capitalized by philanthropy, and partially capitalized by some international donors. And the idea is that because these are close to the ground, they can do something that something like the Green Climate Fund can't do, which is give lots and lots of small grants. Because in the end, there is definitely some big investments that have to be made for adaptation, like sewer networks and piped water networks and so on. But a lot of the investments are small, a well, improved crops, a new park that provides green space that can absorb floodwater, a few $100,000 worth of investment. And that is not worth the time of applying to the Green Climate Fund, quite frankly, because you'll be waiting for 4 years and have to fill out 85 million forms to get the money. And so what these decentralized climate funds do is they have a standard process that the Green Climate Fund or someone else approves, and then they can disperse all of these small projects in line with that, often as loans, recover the money and put it back into that city or back into that community. So it's a really great example of how a small amount of finance can be used very effectively, continually over time to reach a huge number of stakeholders. So I'd really recommend you look up Senegal, Mali, and Kenya and the awesome work they're doing with decentralized climate funds. And the other example that the other point that I think has come out really strongly from the speakers beforehand that I wanted to piggyback on is that this is too often told just as a story of climate finance, as in international climate finance from rich to poor countries. And David alluded to this, but I think it came out with both mayor and deputy mayor, with the synergies with development as well and the priorities for the city. And we don't talk enough about how official development assistance, aid money, should be used in tandem with climate finance to deliver on the things that a city urgently needs today, like public health and emergency services and WASH and so on, which will all enhance your resilience in the face of these climate impacts. And that taps into much, much bigger pots of money and also opens the grounds to things like leveraging private sector investment, working with your tax and spending systems. And again, I wanted to cite an example from the continent that is really best practice on this. Who here is familiar with South Africa's Just Energy Transition Partnership? Lots of people, and everyone knows about it because it's a really big deal. This is basically one of the largest examples of programmatic finance for climate change ever developed, and it's led by what South Africa wants, which is affordable electricity for the majority of people and for its businesses, to deal with load shedding, to handle national debt, to create a whole bunch of jobs in clean tech and in other areas when you have a reliable electricity supply. And coincidentally, it'll slash emissions from the country, which has some of the most carbon intensive electricity in the world. It's such a win for development in South Africa and for the South African economy and South African citizens. And it's such a win for climate. And to be honest, it's a pretty low cost way for the G7 to cut emissions as well. And I think that at the moment, we're only talking about just energy transition partnerships. One's just been announced for Indonesia. One is expected for Vietnam in the next couple of months. One's coming out at India at its G20 presidency this next year. But that kind of programmatic climate and development finance being used in a way that kind of shifts a city, I reckon we should be talking about just urban transition partnerships. I think that kind of programmatic support to get the fundamental infrastructure in place for the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement is the next big opportunity down the line, because that's what most people are going to need to be productive and healthy in the future, and for them to be resilient in the face of climate change and not be producing emissions that will make it worse. So that is not a widespread idea. I'm just planting it with the urban community. But heads up, when you're talking about getting big finance into your cities in the future, that is the kind of model we should be talking about. Either decentralized climate funds that reach the grassroots communities who are neglected in international systems, or striking big deals that can help bridge that big gap on infrastructure opportunities. So good luck, all eyes on this space in the next couple of years.
Thank you, Sarah. I just want to prep the audience that if the panelists allow me, I would like to just ask Marcus's question and then open the floor for any comments or questions, because it's always nice to hear from those that are with us in person. But Marcus, we know the AFDB is moving in the urban finance space. It has for some time. You've even established the Urban and Municipal Development Fund. Do you just want to reflect on what the AFDB is doing in this space, and what would be your recommendation to our cities that need and want more finance? It doesn't have to just be climate finance, as Sarah has very rightly said.
Yeah, thank you, Megan. First of all, thanks a lot for the invitation. Also, thanks a lot to the Scottish government for hosting this pavilion. And thanks for the opportunity to explain a little bit what the African Development Bank is doing in this space in African cities. At the African Development Bank, our slogan is building today a better Africa tomorrow. So we believe that many of the goals, whether it's development goals or climate goals, actually needs to be built. If you think about resilience, drainage needs to be built, buildings need to be fortified, rivers need to be renaturated. If you think about mitigation, buses need to be bought, energy stations need to be upgraded. So we believe a lot about the built environment and putting concrete positive change on the ground. And I believe we have heard many good examples today on aspirations and of the elements necessary to move more of those investments into African cities. I want to maybe highlight 3 points that we believe is necessary, two important considerations and one overarching goal. So the three elements that we see as necessary to mobilize AFDB financing into urban infrastructure or urban investments is, the first one is urban planning. And it's said time and time again, whether it's urban planning, master planning, sectoral plans, climate plans, and by the way, congratulations to the city of Garoua for the excellent climate plan. But we believe oftentimes planning is an abstract art that shows a grand vision of the city, and almost like my daughter writing a list for what she wants for Christmas. But very seldomly these plans contain very concrete investment focused action. And so I believe urban planning with an idea of investments in mind. New expanded areas of cities need to be connected to sewer systems or water systems or drainage systems. So very often times urban plans could be more investment focused. The second point I would like to raise is governance. And governance, again, we oftentimes hear about urban governance, good governance, and this is all good. But we believe that governance needs to also work towards improving the financial solidity of cities. Africa and African cities cannot live on grants or on GCF allocations or even on G7 handouts. African countries and cities need to live with their own money and need to build their financial solidity to invest their own money into their own solutions to become independent. And so we believe that cities need to also improve their own source revenue, ideas for raising more finance to become active players in capital markets and financial markets to finance projects themselves. The time for grants and for handouts is over. So this is the second element. And I would like, for example, to congratulate the city of Kampala, with whom we're working remotely to identify green finance options for improving their ability and to invest in their own climate action. The third point I want to raise is, and again, it's often heard that investments need to prepare it well. Just writing, we want to improve public transport in your plan won't fix the problem. Investments need to be prepared well. Investments need to be prepared solidly, and also there needs to be a very clear financial rationale in those investment preparations. We're thinking about moving beyond pilot projects, moving beyond grants. I believe also the time for those is over. We have done enough pilots. It's now time to build the BRTs and to build the suburban railways and to build the sort of massive e-buses system in cities. So think big, think about transformative investments and prepare those well. So those would be, I think, the three necessary conditions to move more investments. Two critical elements is work with national governments. Oftentimes national governments, they do their thing, cities do their thing, others do, development partners do their thing. It is very crucial to work on this sort of vertical integration between the different levels. Cities and national governments working together, there's a crucial relationship. National financial sovereignty is something that you cannot wash away in panels like this. And also macroeconomic stability is something that is a crucial input to economic growth and development. So working with national governments, with development partners. And the second point is working with the private sector. Most of investments, Africa is oftentimes in my country and in many countries regarded as the third world. But in many ways, the private sector is world-class in Africa and can mobilize investments and can mobilize solutions like technology that are on par with anywhere in the world. So working with the private sector to implement some of the solutions and actions in African cities. And of course, the one goal is not investments. And I think this is, Kampala alluded to it. The one goal is access to risk reducing and low carbon infrastructure by the people of Africa. So don't think about investments as an end goal in itself, but think about targeting and making investments accessible to people, accessible to vulnerable people, accessible to poor people. And so that would be my suggestion, to mobilize more investments, at least from the African Development Bank side. Those are the inputs that we need to mobilize large-scale investment projects in cities in Africa.
Thank you so much, Marcus. Before I turn to the floor, I really just want to thank each panelist for really thoughtful, brilliant inputs. In fact, I think just amongst this panel, we could have a 2 or 3 hour conversation. I'm looking to the floor now to see if there are any comments or questions. I see already 2 hands. So if the team doesn't mind moving with mics, and a third one, we'll take 3 questions or comments, and a 4th one, we'll take 4. Rather take from, I need to engage here, I'll rather take from the top. Just hands up again. There we go. Great. Over to you. So introduce yourself, please, first.
Yes, thank you. I'm Agava Emmanuel. I'm from Uganda. I thank the panelists. My mayor, thank you for attending and thank you for the discussion. I'm Front Aid Foundation. That's an organization I'm working with. And basically, we are working in Vice-Islam. As Front Aid Foundation, we have problems down in the slum at Vice. And the first thing I will first talk about is we have tried on building good clean energy and clean cooking, whereby we are helping people learn how to make charcoal briquettes in order to reduce the emissions that are being spread out from the homes. Vice has about 9,000 people. Those are citizens staying within the slum. And it's a lot of emission that is being produced out of cooking. But we lack the machines to produce good quality briquettes that can really help out in this. Number 2, we have a problem of clean water. Yes, our government has tried to bring national water around in the community, but it is too expensive for the citizens to afford. So as Front Aid Foundation, we try to construct spring water, but this water is too contaminated because it serves people and animals Then we have problems of floods. Whenever it rains too much, this water is too contaminated. We will ask our mayor to think about that, and the development partners, please come and work on our environment. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The lady just behind that gentleman, there she is. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that really inspiring talk and insightful one. My name is Salim Sungu. So I'm originally from Kenya, but I'm a researcher at Imperial College London. And I'm really fascinated that we're having this narrative about our African cities, but I don't understand why we are talking about emergency here. It almost feels like we are reacting to the situation instead of anticipating that these things are going to happen so that we can avert the crisis. One of the speakers talked about the thing about people actually prioritizing what they can escape from the houses with. But most Africans, they don't even live, escaping with their lives is almost feels like a luxury to them. So even we are gambling with our lives with this climate emergency. We don't have anything but our lives to save in such emergency. And the evidence in Lagos, in Nigeria is clear that we are running out of time and our lives are online. So it almost feels like the African cities need like just an overhaul because the infrastructure is not designed to actually avert this emergency and save lives, not even save properties, but just save lives. So what are investors doing in terms of designing the cities that can actually, robust cities that can actually prevent loss of lives and properties, but at the same time make the cities actually sustainable in terms of, self-resilient in future emergency. And I think one of the things which we need to really think about is, anticipate these things so that we design for the future and also build capacity for the people so that they develop solutions for the future. So designing the cities for the future instead of actually just reacting for emergency. So I just want to engage the panelists, what they're thinking about, strategizing instead of doing this coping mechanism, which is not sustainable in the future for us to save our lives. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think the lady in the checked shirt wanted to, no, it was the gentleman at the back.
Oui, bonjour à tous. Mon nom c'est Parfait Blalogue, je viens du Bénin. Et je réagis par rapport au dernier intervenant. Il a dit des choses très intéressantes en disant que les villes doivent pouvoir compter sur leur propre investissement, c'est une réalité. Mais comment faut-il mobiliser l'investissement là si ce n'est pas que pour pressurer davantage les citoyens de la ville? Parce que c'est les mêmes citoyens qui payent les impôts pour l'État. C'est ces mêmes citoyens de la ville qui doivent encore payer les impôts pour faire fonctionner la ville. Vous avez parlé également de la complémentarité entre l'action de l'État et l'action des villes. C'est également une réalité. Mais la question qui se pose, mais comment l'État peut avoir une vision différente ou la ville peut avoir une vision différente de celle de l'État? Comment les deux doivent pouvoir travailler pour pouvoir se partager les mêmes ressources et faire un développement résilient à la base? Parce que nous, on dit toujours, l'État agit surtout toujours sur un territoire d'une collectivité locale quelque part. L'argent de l'État, c'est pour servir quelque part sur le territoire. Mais lorsque l'État vient avec des actions différentes et les villes aussi doivent mener des actions différentes, ça pose énormément de problèmes. Je ne sais pas si vous avez des cas à partager avec nous. Merci.
Thank you so much. Last question or comment is from Dr. Sankori, this gentleman here in the suit, gray suit.
Thank you. My intervention goes to the aspect of the cities and NDCs. If I had one of the comments was about how this can be integrated. But one of the challenges that we still have is, especially in African cities, is the lack of the capacity and the process to document all this in a way that the subnational can have a clear delineation process to capture how the best practices that they infuse or integrate in the development process can then also account for this. So over the time, you find when we discuss the issues of cities, even in the negotiations, you realize it comes back to the issue of double accounting. So, but when at what point can then we be guided to have cities having their way of which they can monitor their performance in this direction? So it comes back to some capacity around this. The other point I think goes direct to Marcos in terms of the private sector involvement. We talk about private sector involvement as well as the public, sector involvement in the climate finance. But in the negotiations, when we capture the aspect of private sector, how does this play out? Already private sector is being used. What are some of the thoughts that you can bring out which we can use as negotiators? Because now we are seeing how the negotiation also plays out with the implementation in what we are discussing here. Then a comment just to our sister who also brought the issue of climate emergency. I think I just want to observe a point that there are several issues around which some of us can also comment around this. But when it comes to cities and the aspect of the enhancing the resilience and enhancing adaptive capacity, especially the segment of the urban poor, then comes into play here. And so as much as we'll be talking about the climate emergency as an issue that should not be there, but it has caught up with us. So what do we do with the existing situation? So that is also something that comments can come around and we see a solution to also address what she raised. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sangori. So we have 7 minutes because there's another session starting at past. I just want to look to our panelists to see who would like to respond. I have 1, I have 2, I have 3, I have 4, which means you've each got 1 minute if you don't mind, because I do want to welcome mayors to the COMSA initiative and I need a minute for that. So let's go, Deputy Lord Mayor first, your minutes.
Thank you so much. I should say I've been so much intrigued by the conversations and particularly by the lady from Kenya, who seems to be a bit frustrated. And straightforward, I would like to answer her question and say, I don't think we have any climate change emergencies. Because for me, an emergency is something that happens when you're not prepared for it or when you're not expecting it. For example, I can give an example of Kampala. We know the months when it is going to rain, you get it, but we continue doing the same things. We know that if we continue using plastic bags, people are going to continue dying, but we continue doing the same things over and over again. We know that when we cut down trees, we are definitely cutting on the lives of people. We know that if we continue using diesel, we are increasing on the emissions, and yet up to now, all government entities continue to use diesel. And I want to agree with you that we honestly need a total overhaul, because these are things we know, these are things that we talk about, but these are things that we never take into consideration. So I don't know what's wrong, and I probably also cannot answer this question, that we only seem to be getting from things are getting worse. And we know them, and we can clearly see that things are getting worse, and yet we continue doing the same things. Of course, for some of us who come from countries where we do not have democracy and good governance, ours really, we still have a very long way to go, because even when we can clearly see we have activists who are protesting against the cutting of trees, then you'll have court, pronouncing itself and saying, yes, trees must be cut down. We need to have sugar. So we have all these challenges, and the people get confused. Whom do we follow? Do we follow the environmental activists who are saying forests should not be cut, or we should follow the court. And lastly, to my brother from Uganda, all I can say is that the struggle continues. The partners have heard your call, and we probably hope they can do something. But he said no more handouts. So I don't know how we are going to handle that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lord Deputy Mayor. Let's go to Marcus then. That's a good segue.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Quick answers. So Nigeria, the question on what could be done. I wouldn't dare suggesting the city of Lagos what to do, but we had the conversation with the governor of Lagos State this morning, and he said, we need to imagine more. Imagine how Lagos looks like in 25, 30 years. And they have a resilient vision, and they have created a vehicle to finance that with over 100 projects around this. And so imagine big, imagine the future, and then build the mechanisms and the investments to achieve that. And don't run behind dangers and emergencies, but go towards a positive image. Second question from Benin and Kenya, I think they're related on the alignment between local and national and so on, and how to leverage financing. And I think that's the key word. Don't think about cities doing everything themselves. I'm from Berlin in Germany. Berlin doesn't buy buses or runs a bus system. They create an entity. They gave the power and authority to that entity, and then they are buying the buses and they're running the transport system. It costs the city of Berlin not a single cent for buying buses and running the public transport system, because that entity does it. They provide guarantees and everything, but that entity can leverage it, service providers. So that was also a response to the private sector angle. And just the last point on the city and national government relationship. And I want to be, again, we have looked at the NDCs, and the government of Kenya, I think you're from Kenya, right? If I remember correctly, has urban actions in their NDC. So there's no question on double accounting. Cities in Kenya doing climate action are contributing to the national determined contribution. So let's not make this a city national government thing. Cities don't need to create an own accounting mechanism and everything. You know, cities are part of a national system of settlements, of cities. I don't think there is a sort of a barrier between this. You know, think about this as a complementary set of actors wanting the same thing. Better Kenya tomorrow.
Thank you, Marcus. Let's go to David, and then say, are you okay? Okay, David.
Okay, well, you're short of time, so maybe 3 words.
Then Sarah can go. Carry on.
Well, 3 groups. Town planning, good governance is absolutely essential. Unusual collaborations, and I'm going to roof over our head with Swindlers International how to tackle the 2 billion people going to be living in slums, informalities. So it's mobilizing everybody and answer some of the questions. We've got to mobilize the private sector, the financiers, the designers, architects, and everybody. So town planning, governance, radical collaboration.
Thank you. That does mean, Sarah, take a minute.
Thank you very much. So I wanted to pick up on a common theme that came across from a number of people in the audience. And I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that a lot of the challenges that are faced go far beyond climate. The injustice that is climate change is embedded in much bigger injustices. So for the lady from Kenya, you're completely right. When we talk about the climate emergency, in part, it's because a group of countries are now threatened that have not been living with, say, a poverty emergency for decades. And I think, you know, we see it in the financial system as well. For the gentleman from Benin, you know, the system is skewed against those who have been living in poverty and now face climate risk as well. But I mostly wanted to, against that backdrop, I wanted to say that there are extraordinary success stories in response to mobilizing the finance for this. And finally, I can use an example from the panel, which is to say, over the last decade, Kampala has done the most extraordinary job of improving its domestic resource mobilization from a whole range of different sources. And the really striking thing is it has done that by tackling both supply and demand. It has cracked down on corruption massively, closing a string of dubious bank accounts, and it has used the funds very visibly to improve people's lives on things like street lights, solar panels, tackling potholes in the roads, sidewalks, and so on. And so you've created a culture of tax paying that I think has done great things for the city in terms of increasing the resources at its fingertips. So that there is obviously a global story here about injustice, but there is a local story of extraordinary success in the face of immense challenges that deserves to be celebrated.
Thank you so much, Sarah. So to close us out, we as COMSA just want to welcome some new signatories to the initiative that signed up here at COP. Guda Maria Nigeria, Ekiti State Nigeria, and Yof Senegal. Wonderful, but most importantly, right at the back of the room, we have Mayor Pakunsi, who's from the Swelopelo municipality and joined our family here. So welcome, Mayor. We are so glad to have you part of the COMSA family. And that closes our session. Please continue the conversation.